Discover the best in local business news with a subscription to the IBJ and Inside Indiana Business. For a limited time, try us out for just $1 a week for 8 weeks. Claim this limited time offer now at ibj.com/trial offer.
When what worked stops working, I point purpose-driven leaders to Prolific, the growth firm. They turn plans into results with full-service marketing and strategy, focused on outcomes, not vanity metrics. Head to prolifichq.com to learn more.
I think the biggest key to the new museum is it allows us to tell the story of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway in a way that we could never do before. We wanted storytelling to be a key item to that. We wanted the artifacts to still be front and center and help tell those stories.
Hi, I'm Dave Neff, host of Talent Scout. On this show, we shine a light on Indiana's next generation of leaders who are making a difference in business, community, and civic life. These are real conversations about purpose, mentorship, and building a future that matters. Join me as we invest in leadership that lasts. All right, welcome back to another episode of Talent Scout. I am thrilled today to have my new friend, Jason Vansickle. Jason is the Vice President of Curation and Education at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Museum, IMS Museum. So in my new role with the 500 Festival, we're getting to work a lot together, and I'm excited for our audience just to learn about all the great things that are going on at IMS Museum. Welcome to the show.
Well,
Jason.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, you bet. Well, as I'd like to do with all my guests, I like to kind of go back and start at the beginning, just on you and your childhood. I know you grew up just on the south side here in Indianapolis, but maybe tell us what life was like growing up in your family.
Yeah, so I grew up on the south side. I went to Southport High School and the Perry Township district of schools, and it was your kind of 90s kid life, right before, as we know, life today with cell phones and things like that. So I had kind of a upbringing of going out and exploring and things like that, but then obviously had the more tech heavy later part of my adolescence. But I grew up around automobiles through my father and grandfather. It was a hobby for them. So really, I'm a bit of a product of my upbringing when it comes to my position now at the museum with that background.
Very cool. Yeah, you used the term beforehand. They were hot rodders. So maybe explain to our audience what's a hot rodder.
Yeah, so a hot rodder is a person that obviously soups up cars. Back in the day, it used to be like 30s cars, and then it obviously has grown over the years in evolution with automobiles. So it's typically tend to like 30s and 50s cars, but then now the muscle cars are part of it, the 60s. And even, kids of my age with the imports, you can kind of use the hot rodder term, really just souping up vehicles, whether it be full restorations or just mechanical.
So you grew up from a young age being around your father, grandfather who were fixing up cars, working on cars. Did you guys go to a lot of races or car shows, or what were you exposed to from that level?
Yeah, so we would go to car shows. That was kind of like vacations for us most of the time. So we would travel not only locally, they would have car shows across the city like they do now, but we would go to Columbus, Ohio, and for Good Guys, which is a big national car show. We would go down to Pigeon Forge in Tennessee for the Rod Run that was down there. So every year we would kind of have these touch points of car shows that we would go to. So seeing photos of me being just a very young kid being towed around or walking with my dad through amongst all these cars and enthusiasts, it's always been part of my life.
Yeah. So you clearly loved it. Some kids grow up around a certain profession and they want to get as far away from it as possible. Mm-hmm. But given where you are today, it's something that you enjoy. Talk to us a little bit about, so graduate from Southport High School. Mm-hmm. Believe you went to IU Indy, mm-hmm. formerly IUPUI. Was that always the plan, or how did you land on kind of staying local and making that decision to go to IU Indy?
Yeah, I had a great time at Southport, and you always have that big decision where to go, and obviously wanted to look around, but one of the big things was the affordability of at the time IUPUI, IU Indy now.
Yeah.
So I could have a lot of access to a lot of great education opportunities, be here in Indianapolis, which I loved at the time. It's still today. And, I that was one of the big things. I think it's always a big challenge for an 18-year-old to go into higher learning.
Yeah.
IU Indy really set me up for the future.
Wow. So I know you shared this with me, but as an undergrad, I think it was still you were maybe 2011, 15 years or so ago, you decided to seek out being a tour guide at the IMS Museum, which was a very different thing back then. But how did that opportunity even hit your radar, as a 19, 20-year-old?
Yeah, so being around automobiles, I always had a passion for the cars and being around them. That passion, as I grew older, I was always into history in general. So I kind of tend to side towards the history of the automobile and how it changed society, modernized the United States and the world. And obviously, being from Indianapolis, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway is a catalyst for that. A lot of the innovations, the technologies that you find in your passenger cars today were developed and tested and tried at the Speedway on the 2.5-mile oval. So I really started getting into the founders, the early building of the track, wanted to learn as much as I could when it came to that. Obviously, the drivers and the history past that. But I took a chance in 2011 when I was an undergrad and wanted to work at the museum and send them an email, and it happened. So
wow.
It was a pretty great opportunity, and the experiences from there were tremendous.
So you're taking classes, get this opportunity to go be essentially a docent, right?
Mm-hmm.
A tour guide. What, how many tours would you give in a day or a week, and what did it look like back then?
Yeah, I mean, the museum had a great car collection. I'll always have a soft spot for how the museum was, because for a lot of race fans, because that's their first access to the history of the Speedway. So it was always great to bring in a lot of interstate and international guests. In some cases, they were longtime race fans. Other cases, the first time seeing the place. So each tour was a bit different from a guest standpoint and interaction. And, being able to tell the history of the Speedway through the tours was something I found that I really enjoyed right off the bat. Probably wasn't the most, like, when it comes to a public speaking standpoint at that time, interested in that. But I found that it was just really interesting to be able to tell those stories. So, really depending on the day. In some cases it'd be 3 or 4 tours, but then like during FFA, which is still a huge time for us in the city, we'd do probably 10 or 12 tours a day.
Wow.
Because we'd be open to welcome the guest in.
Yeah, a lot of corduroy jackets going through that place.
A lot of blue, a lot of different names on the back, which is always great to see.
So, and I know we'll get to what the museum is today, but you've seen a lot of transformation in your 15 years of working there, both as a student and full time. But maybe for those that don't know the history of the museum and when it came to be, can you enlighten us as to when it opened, how the idea came about? Because the track was built, I want to say, was it 1909, and then the first race was 11.
The first 500, yeah.
First 500 was 1911. So, we're going back well over 100 years, but the museum came along when, and how did this whole idea get started?
Yeah, so obviously when Tony Holman purchased the Speedway in 1945 from Eddie Rickenbacker, there was a lot of updates that needed to happen to have the race in 1946. The Speedway sat dormant during the World War II years and really fell in disrepair. So it was a Herculean effort to get the Speedway ready for May 1946. But there are records and speeches that Tony made where he talked about this idea of a museum. Obviously, it took a few years to get to that point. And unfortunately, there was a bit of a tragic reasoning for the museum. In late 1954, we lost Wilbur Shaw, who was president, 3-time winner of the 500, later became president, really found Tony Holman and saved the track, which is a story within itself. But, Wilbur was a key component of the history and the future of the Speedway. And losing Wilbur was a loss on not only the Speedway and Tony himself, but the community when it comes to the racing. So instead of making a monument or a statue or things like that to honor Wilbur, the thought was Tony and a gentleman named Carl Kaiser, who became the first curator of the Speedway Museum. They wanted to do something, and the idea of the museum came back up. So at the time, the offices were located on Capitol Avenue in Indianapolis, the administration office for the Speedway. So they started to build a admin building, which would have been on the corner 16th and Georgetown. It opened in 1956, and there was kind of two wings to it, the administrative side and then what became the museum. And the museum opened in May in 1956, and it was a pretty small endeavor. I think there were 6 cars at the time. Yeah. Wilbur Shaw's Maserati being one of them. Carl Kaiser kind of hunted and looked around for past 500 vehicles. And then over the years, the museum housed in that building, they gained more cars, more trophies, more artifacts, and it quickly filled up. It could hold about 13 vehicles. Yeah. And that original building filled up. Tony also, in his hometown of Terre Haute, created something called the Early Wheels Museum, which was right across the street from Clabber Girl, the company that there was their main business, if you will. And that housed a lot of passenger cars, specifically Indiana-built automobiles. So under the foundation, which is still today our 501c3, we technically had 2 museums during the 50s, 60s, and then 70s. When the museum kind of outgrew its location in the admin building, they built the current building in 1976.
Okay. Wow. So really, Wilbur Shaw's passing in 1954 served as a catalyst for Tony Holman to kind of, hey, we need to start a museum, and that opened in 56.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, it's great to see Tony have that foresight, because auto collecting is a big industry right now today when you look at it in 2026. But you had few key collectors at that time that were really starting to collect vehicles, race cars especially, but even passenger cars. So to be able to grab the Marmon Wasp and the National and the Maserati at that point, when a year-old race car, in some cases decades-old race cars, was really worthless in a lot of people's eyes, was a huge endeavor to have what we have today.
Yeah. Well, it's neat that IMS Museum, where you work, and the 500 Festival, where I now work, the festival started in 1957 by a group of 4 local business leaders after they'd gone the prior year to Kentucky Derby and seen the Kentucky Derby Festival that was started to support the Derby. So both of our entities kind of emerged about 70 years ago, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, and I think what's great, we obviously have 2 different mission statements, but at the end of the day, we're community driven. Yeah. We are there to celebrate and promote the Indianapolis Motor Speedway and the 500. And I think we've been historically 2 great opportunities for fans to engage in the month of May and really help grow the Speedway over those 70 years.
Absolutely. Well, so museum gets built there at the corner of 16th and Georgetown in 1956. 1976 is when the current building was built. Now you're a history guy, as you mentioned. You studied history, was your major, right, at IUND. So you're doing these tours in 2011, 12, 13.
Yep.
I believe you got your first full-time offer from the museum in 15. Yep. So was that just sort of a natural, like somebody left and a role emerged? Were they creating some new roles, and you'd been hanging around the hoop, so to speak, and so you were kind of front of the line? How did that opportunity come about?
Yeah, for the longest time, the museum staff-wise was a small but mighty staff.
Yeah.
And obviously, being a separate entity from IMS, had their own challenges, obviously funding and things like that. So it wasn't an entity that, could just go and acquire talent or people or positions. It had to be really strategic. So, I knew being with the museum, this is somewhere I wanted to be and help it grow, but didn't really know as I was finishing undergrad if I could be part of that. It just was the situation at the time. So I kind of gave myself, after I graduated, 6 months to figure that out before I would have to find something. And fortunately enough, it was April of 2015. There was a gentleman who was with the museum, had a key role with the museum for a long time, and he was retiring. And he was pretty much finishing out the month of May, so was able to join full time in the collection area with the vehicles and the non-vehicle collection and exhibitions, and worked under Ellen Byerly, who was with the museum for a long period at that point. So started June 1st, 2015 full time, and really haven't stopped since.
Wow. How big was the full-time staff in 2015?
Oh, I would say we were probably at that time maybe 15 or 16.
Yeah.
If you take out the part-time docents and things like that, and that may be a pretty exaggerated number too.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a small but mighty staff working to care for the collection and obviously welcome guests in.
Yeah. And today, the size of the team at the museum is what?
Yeah, we've been fortunate enough to grow in a variety of different ways and means, but now we're about 35 full-time staff.
Yeah.
Really improved a lot of areas that we needed to, not only for the renovation, but obviously the operations of the museum also.
Yeah. And I want to get into the renovation that took place and opened almost a year ago now. But, over the last 11 years, you've had quite the ascent to where your current role leading all, curation and education. So you manage the collection at the museum, the restoration programs and initiatives, the education programs. That's a lot of responsibility. Can you, and you report into the new president, Mike Good, can you share more about just the scope of the collection? Because I think a lot of people have no idea. They see what's maybe in the museum now, if they've been there, but also there's a collection that the collection extends far beyond what you see in the museum. So maybe talk about the collection.
Yeah. So like most museums, it's kind of industry standard. A museum could show about 1% to 2% of their collection at any given time. And that's from your typical, say, home museum all the way to the more elite museums, if you want to call them that, like the Smithsonian or some of the big city museums. So we have 200 vehicles in the collection, around 200 vehicles, and then we have 55,000 pieces of artifact. And those artifacts range from archive documentation of race results and tickets and credentials and programs and all that, all the way from suits, helmets, trophies, and other artifacts that pertain not only to the 500, but IMS as a whole. So, I have a great team, whether it be the restoration department or the collection department that we've been able to grow over the last 8 years to manage and really care for the collection in a way that they couldn't in the past. So, it's one of those things where at the end of the day, I'm a steward of history and a steward of that collection. And, if there's a time that eventually I'm not there at whatever opportunity, you want to leave the collection in a better state than when we inherited it because of the lack of resources and things like that. So I think that's one of our main goals right now. Obviously, there's gaps in the collection that we're trying to address, not only vehicle-wise, but the non-vehicle collection too. And then just getting the vehicle collection running. I mean, we've been tasked by our board to up the status of the cars, if you will, from an operating standpoint. So we have a range of vehicles that need your typical routine maintenance, though it'd be race car, all the way to projects that would need a full restoration of various different degrees. So we're managing that over the time, and have been able to add 5 full-time restoration staff members over the last 5-6 years. And then the education department is fairly new for us. That we were able to add 3 members of that staff, which are all former teachers or administrators that know the school systems today, understand, think like teachers, so they can take the topics at hand that relate to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, which at the end of the day, racing is a test bed for steam components. So they could take those items and put them into whether it be summer camps, homeschool days, family days, just your day in, day out interactives for guests of all ages.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I'm really proud about in the more recent past is us being able to get off the ground running with the team that we have to really get that education up and running.
Yeah. So on the education front, I know you guys are welcoming in field trips from different schools. What are different ways for just youth to engage? You mentioned summer camps. I don't know if that's an active program, but what are sort of some of those on-ramps to get youth throughout the state of Indiana and beyond really engage with the history of IMS?
Yeah, so for the renovated museum, there's a lot more interactivity, hands-on learning, and storytelling in different modes that guests of all ages can enjoy. One of the things that we have two specific areas that we upgraded and implemented. One is the Scott and Sandy Borchetta qualifying zone, which really focuses on that hands-on learning. So we have a soft play youth area that we call our rookie area that are for kids 5 and under. We have the dissected car, so it has a current NTT IndyCar Series car that's digitally and physically blown apart, so you can see underneath the bodywork as a view you don't typically get as a race fan. We have a real fill pit stop challenge that goes through the different parts of the pit stops, the duties of the pit crew members. And then partnering with SimCraft, we have 6 iRacing simulators that give you a chance to virtually qualify for the Indianapolis 500, which is always great for kids of all ages. And then in addition to that, we have the Alan Whitehill Clues Foundation Innovation Workshop, which is a STEAM classroom. Yeah. And we have various different activities that we rotate through there. And those 2 areas are open for the guests, so day in, day out. We also do homeschooling programs that we brought. Jake and his team brought those in. Field trips have increased dramatically with the new renovation. And then this summer, which we have announced, the registration is open. We have a variety of different summer camps dates over the next few months in the summer. And they range from a partnership with BorgWarner. And then we also have some that go kind of into the coding, which is an area that obviously you think of race cars on the track, but the amount of data that's running through these cars today is pretty phenomenal. So we have a variety of different opportunities for an educational standpoint for kids to come visit the museum, whether it's a Saturday in June or a public program that we also offer.
You guys are only closed like 1 day of the year, 2 days of the year?
2, yeah. We're open 363. So
wow.
Thanksgiving and Christmas Day.
Okay. Yeah, that's pretty amazing. You mentioned 200 cars in the collection. Now, I want to say at any given time, actually in the museum, there's just about 50.
Yep.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Could you maybe enlighten folks, like what's your process, Jason, for how you go about identifying cars to either add to the collection potentially, or conversely, cars to dispense of from the collection?
Yeah, so the last, I would say, 8 years, we've gone through a pretty heavy review of our collection, the vehicle collection. And this is ongoing. We're on the cusp of reviewing and editing because it's a living document at the end of the day. So we started in 2018 to review the collection, try to be more mission centric and focused in our collection. And it's not just race cars. It's not just Indianapolis 500 cars. Our mission is to celebrate the history of IMS. So, the other races that are held here are things on our radar now, past and present. Indiana and Indianapolis was a thriving automotive production for Indiana-made passenger cars. So you have the kind of those legacy brands of Stutz, Marmon, Duesenberg, National, that you could drive around Indianapolis and see. Cole is another one. So we have a 30-car collection of Indiana-built automobiles that range from 1886 all the way to about 1932. So we're always collecting. It's not just vehicles, it's non-vehicle objects, but we do have gaps in the collection. So the policies that we have in place try to highlight those gaps, and we can focus in on more of those. Obviously, being a not-for-profit donations are key, and there's benefits to that. But we'll also go out if there's something that we can acquire. And a big part of this is working with our collection committee and the board. So the collection committee is working with us lock and step to find out what these gaps are, what these areas that we need to focus on. And one of the good success stories is last year we acquired 14 Chip Ganassi vehicles. At the time, all the Indianapolis 500 winners and a variety of different cars that kind of fill stories that we couldn't tell, mainly from 2000 to 2022. So those vehicles really added an extreme gap in our collection of modern vehicles. So we're always looking, we're always soliciting donations and seeing how we can improve the collection.
So some are donations, some you guys are actually, able to use funds and go out and acquire them. What is the, but it's not uncommon for your phone to ring or somebody from the board and somebody wants to donate a car to the collection. Like that happens.
Yeah. One of the more notable ones is, I think it was 2018, the old restoration show Gas Monkey Garage called us, and they had Larry Basiglia's 1967 Ford Econoline van, and it sat in Arizona and it was sun-baked and rusted. And Larry's an interesting guy because from 1950 to 1987, he was first in line to the Indianapolis 500. He drove from the West Coast, kind of that area, and was the first one, and had still has the Guinness Book of World Records for that. So we had in '67, Tony Holman and the local Ford dealers gave him this van to replace 1955 Chevy panel wagon that he had. So we had that car in the collection, and it's all stickered up with decals of the period. It has all the years that he's been. So getting that call, not only one was it great to be able to have both the vehicles that he used at that time, but also there was a film shoot, and they wanted to be first in line again. So they worked with IMS on that, and there it pops up from time to time. So we get the calls saying, "Hey, saw you on Gas Monkey." But whether it be a vehicle that could have been in someone's family for generations, all the way to a more modern vehicle, we're constantly looking for donations and acquisitions.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us here on Talent Scout. We're going to take a quick break to hear from our sponsor, so stay tuned. Most organizations hit a point where growth stalls. The message blends in, the site stops converting, pipeline softens. That's when I tell leaders about Prolific, the growth firm for purpose-driven leaders. Through full-service marketing and strategy, they clarify the story, rebuild your go-to-market, and drive sales. Most importantly, Prolific holds itself accountable to the metrics that matter to you. If you're ready for your next growth stage, learn more about Prolific at prolifichq.com. Well, let's talk about this facelift that the museum got. Reopened, like I said, I think April of 25, over $60 million renovation. What impact, you've been there a long time, what impact have you seen over the course of the last year just from visitors, fans, exposure, new opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, it completely changed the museum and people's perspective of the museum. We would do exhibitions, change out vehicles from time to time, but we were limited because the building, from a visual standpoint, was dated. We didn't have some of the amenities that, say, you would see in new museums. I think the biggest key to the new museum is it allows us to tell the story of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway in a way that we could never do before. So we wanted storytelling to be a key item to that. We wanted the artifacts to still be front and center and help tell those stories. But at the end of the day, we can add immersive experience like the starting line. When you walk in, and it kind of gives guests either a reminder, if they're a longtime fan, of what makes the Indianapolis special when it comes to the pre-race and the lead up to the green flag, or people that's their first time at the Speedway. It's showing them what makes this different. So there's also interactives across. We talked about the qualifying zone and innovation workshop. The Team Penske gallery that allows us to highlight Team Penske's nearly 60 years of success at the Speedway and bring in vehicles from their collection. So rotation is a key with the new museum across the board with exhibitions, vehicles on display, items on display. But I think people, whether they're long-term fans or first time, they walk through the museum, they experience it, they have an engaging time, but then they leave understanding what Indianapolis Motor Speedway is, what the 500 means to Americana, and hopefully, gets them riled up for the 110th running of the Indianapolis 500.
That's right. Well, it is remarkably well done. I had a chance to visit it, probably 6 months ago, and then have been back, obviously, in the building here recently with various meetings. But, I think when I was there going through it, that do you still have the 4-time winners exhibit, or did that transition yet?
So that is the Chip Ganassi Gallery. That and the Bobby Rahal Family Gallery are 2 rotating galleries. So when we opened, we did honor the 4-time winners. Now in the Ganassi Gallery, we have the Now Stay Tuned exhibition that's open through May. It highlights how people consume the 500 outside the Speedway through the history of the radio, with IMS radio network being a key component of that, and also the television broadcast. So it goes from the closed circuit theater opportunities in the 60s through the ABC, NBC, and now Fox's role as a partner in the series. So that is in the Ganassi Gallery. And on the flip side, in the Bobby Rahal Family Gallery, we have Setting the Pace, which has 8 pace cars from all the way back from 1915 to 2025, last year's pace car, on display. So we can rotate those. We look to open a new exhibition in June, so after the race. And that's one of the other components that just keeps the museum fresh and allows us to tell more stories.
Yeah, that's great. Well, it is a cultural asset now, I think, for this city. And I know, I'll let you brag a little bit. You guys have received some pretty big awards, right? What was the International Museum Award that you received?
Yeah, we received the International Motor Forum Museum Award, which was won. Obviously, there's a lot of kind of kudos and compliments from other museum and non-museum entities that we've had over the past few years. And it's great. It was a lot of hard work. It was a lot of effort in a relatively short period. But at the end of the day, I think what we're most proud about is being able to tell the stories of IMS to a new generation of audience.
Well, what has you excited about the future at IMS Museum?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we're constantly rotating exhibitions, artifacts, and presentations. But we announced last year a 72,000 square foot restoration and event center that will be located on Polco Street. And that's going to really change the game. As you mentioned, we had 200 vehicles that will allow those vehicles to be open for the public for the first time. So it's a second campus, public access. Not only will you be able to see nearly 150 vehicles on display in there, but also you'll be able to overlook and watch our restoration team work on the vehicles. So really shows the craftsmanship of their work. And for younger audiences, I think a job opportunity outcome. So, you can watch that. And if you have a younger person that likes to work with their hands or likes race cars, it makes them aware to this career, whether it be in classic race cars, restoration of passenger cars, or even with the modern teams. I think there's some job and economic development growth there too.
That's great. And that's just kind of just off downtown Main Street and Speedway, right? Just like a half mile from where you currently are. Right?
Yeah, it's straight south of the track on Polco Street. And, it's always great to be part of Speedway because of its connection, the town of Speedway, its connection with Carl Fisher and Lim Trotter and all that. So it once that's up and running, it's going to be a great opportunity to really expand that public access to our collection.
Well, maybe pivoting as we wrap up here to just some more personal questions. You've stayed in the same organization, right? Your entire career, and have been rewarded for it now with a pretty big scope of responsibility at the IMS Museum as it's been evolving the last 12 years or so. I'd love to hear, Jason, what is something that maybe as you think back on your career, and we've got a lot of young people listening, what's something you did early in your career that has really kind of been an accelerator for you?
I think the big thing is taking the opportunities, even if they're not presented to you. I obviously sending an email, in some cases can be daunting or not daunting, but that was really the catalyst of that allowed me to start my career.
Yeah.
I think another big thing with me was I've had a lot of different people, whether it be board members or colleagues, that just listening and trying to absorb as much as you can from them and their life experiences and their past, that has helped me. I was really fortunate to work alongside our track historian, Donald Davidson, and no one's going to replace Donald, but to be able to just kind of soak in that, and whether it be Donald or even when I was a docent, other docents and their experiences, has really helped me in my particular situation. But I think you can apply those for a broad, different set of careers. So, taking that opportunity, taking the chance, and obviously listening are three things that I think are pretty critical.
Yeah. You mentioned Donald Davidson. Has there been another mentor or someone that really believed in you, saw something in you, and kind of changed your paradigm for what might be possible in your career?
Yeah, like I said, I've been fortunate to be around a lot of successful people, and people who have got things done, whether it be community, business, private lives. So I have a good roster, but I really come back to two people. One is Rob Dyson, our past board chair.
Yeah.
Rob is just a tremendous personality. He's not from Indianapolis; he's a New Yorker, so there's a little bit of a culture shock there with Rob. But whether it be his racing career, his business career, his community efforts, and this being one of them, really couldn't do the museum without his leadership there. So just learning from him. And then from a day in, day out standpoint, I go back to our past president, Joe Hale.
Yeah.
Joe, it was just a pleasure to work with him for the 5 years that I had the opportunity, not only in his role with the museum, but also just his track record of being community minded, community involved. He wanted the museum to be part of the community conversation. He may have not been a race fan, or he had his past with the race, but he understood what the Speedway meant to Indiana and Indianapolis. So, and developed that passion during his time here. So, I mean, I learned so much from both him and Rob, in a short period. And obviously, as we continue to be introduced to people, and with Mike Good coming on, there's a lot of learning ahead of me too that can help guide my development as I grow older.
Well, I know a lot happened under Joe's watch in about 5 years in terms of raising the money, which sometimes that takes more than 5 years to raise the amount of money you guys raised for renovation and to get the actual work done. And so, he certainly left the campsite better than he found it. Just a couple more questions here. For those that are listening out there that are early in their career, what would be like your best piece of advice?
Yeah, I think the relationship building is key, especially today when it's easier to send an email or direct message somebody or something like that. I think that's key, is that human element, those relationships. And what I've learned over the last 8 years is those relationships, whether it's a passing by conversation or you've known this person for X amount of years, those are both important, because you never know when something else will come around and you'll need to either lean on them or ask them for advice.
Yeah.
Advice is always critical too. Whether it's a good job or hey, I'm upset about this, and everything in between. If you ask someone for advice, you're going to get answers that you can improve, whether it be yourself or your path or the institution that you work for. So I just keep going back to relationship building.
Yeah, that's great. All right, last question I like to ask all my guests, because I think it can be subjective. How do you define success?
Yeah, I'm very, very fortunate because I'm in a position in which I'm passionate about. And I think that in its own sense is a form of success. And I'm a product of my upbringing. I've been around cars, but if you can find passion, whether it's a new passion, a new career, a new opportunity, you can work in an area that you're passionate about and build upon that. I think that's one of the key aspects of success, because it is subjective, as you pointed out. But to be fulfilled in your career and something you enjoy, I think is a sign of success.
Most days you're waking up excited about what you get to go do.
Yeah,
not that there aren't stressors, especially when your team's working on old cars, and I'm sure there's headaches that pop up.
There's always those crunch points. We had them on the lead up to the opening. I always joke around. We participate in a historic lap about 10:45 in the morning on race morning, and my colleagues joke around. It's probably one of the more stressful times for me. Just stressful, but just pure enjoyment, because not only are the legends in the cars themselves from a driver standpoint, you have these legendary cars. They're about to roll out. You're part of the pre-race that people just love. But obviously in the back of your mind, you're relieved when they all come back in turn one.
They're not conking out on the back stretch.
So that's always a great part of pre-race, and we're excited IMS and Doug allows us to do that.
Well, Jason, I really appreciate you coming on. I'm excited about the work you and I and our organizations will continue to do, and really this I-500 collective, which is IMS Museum, and the festival, our three entities. We are better together in terms of just amplifying what is our state's crown jewel, IMS and the Indy 500. And so kudos on all the success already, but know your best days are ahead of you. And if there's anything we can do, don't hesitate to reach out.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the partnership and look forward to, obviously, a collaboration between the three organizations. But I appreciate you having me on today.
Yeah, you bet, Jason. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Dave Neff, host of Talent Scout. On this show, we shine a light on Indiana's next generation of leaders who are making a difference in business, community, and civic life. These are real conversations about purpose, mentorship, and building a future that matters. Join me as we invest in leadership that lasts. Subscribe now on your favorite podcast app or listen at ibjpodcasts.com.
Want to give your team a real edge? The IBJ Group Plan delivers unlimited access to every story, every report, every video from IBJ and Inside Indiana Business for your whole team. Cover some or all of your employees with one simple payment. The more you add, the more you save. It's smart, it's flexible, and it saves you up to 30% off the standard rate. Already have IBJ subscribers in your office? Group up and save big. Learn more and get started now at ibj.com/group-plan.